Deacon Arthur is many things to many people. He's an author, a radio host, a revivalist. He was a businessman and in his life as a civilian. I know him to be a great worker in the Office for Black Catholic Ministries when he was the director in the Archdiocese of Hartford. He has served as a Catholic chaplain at community colleges. I think it was Hartford's Capital Community College. Many people know Deacon as a revivalist who can preach, and he preached from the Word, thank God. And he has preached in many places from New England to down south, where he loves the South. He preached from Mexico to Chicago, and he will tell you that he's also a family man and has a loving wife who is a part of his diaconate ministry, the other half, if you will. Many of you have heard Deacon say in his chatting and flirting with our parishioners that he grew up on the south side of Chicago, and in the 1940s and 50s when he was a 10-year-old boy, he even was a schoolmate as he moved on in life with Emmett Till. And I know his ministry includes telling the Till story many times in many places. Deacon, you just got a long list of ministries. I'm not going to keep going because it's going to sound like an
that's
obituary.
enough, brother.
Yeah, I don't want to do an obituary, but now listen, when I travel, if people ask me when they say, Father, what you really want us to know? I said, listen, just tell them I'm Leola Jordan's baby boy.
There it is.
Tell me the one thing you want people to know about you as Deacon Art Miller.
I died for my people.
You died for your people. Now that's a service I'm glad to hear about, Deacon. So that's what we're going to do, Deacon. We're going to talk about you dying to self to serve your people. The first question I got for you that I hope the saints would be interested in knowing is, tell us what attracted you to becoming a deacon. Why did you feel called to that life as a deacon?
Man, you know, Father, when I first went to catechism, somehow I knew I was supposed to be a clergy. I mean, and this was, 1955, 1956. I remember that the priest was a racist and didn't really want black kids, black boys to be, in the priesthood, so that, I was dissuaded from that. And but I remember standing on the corner at St. Clotilde Church, 85th and Calumet, on that corner, 84th. And I know God spoke to me and said that I was going to be a priest. Well, then I went to high school and took Latin and all that, because this was pre-Vatican II. And then I met this girl. I said, well, you ain't going to be no priest. And so, I'm being real. But the idea of serving remained in me. And after I went to college, got out of the Army in 1970, I came to the realization there was another vocation, an ordained vocation in the church, and people talked to me about it. And my wife asked if I'd wait until our kids were older. And then miraculously, 20-something years ago, we joined a new church. And after 3 months, the priest walked up to me and said, fill this out, you're supposed to be a deacon. And, I looked at the papers, and the paper said, you had to be in that church for 5 years. And I said, Father, this says I'm supposed to be in the church 5 years. And he looked at me and said, don't worry about it, fill it out. Next month, I was in the diaconate program. So I don't know if it's divine intervention, the roughness of that priest, or God just sent him. But it was always there. And as I moved around and tried not to be ordained, God had other ideas. And I love I love being a deacon.
Now,
Love it.
Deacon, if I hear you correctly, you're saying somebody recognized your vocational call to be a part of the parish community as a deacon, and in that role of deacon, your heart and mind kind of agree with it, and then you say you love being a deacon. If you had to pick out the one thing you love the most, that we know service is one of them, we know being at the altar and preaching is others, but what's the one thing that you could share with us, if you don't mind, that people would never figure out from a generic standpoint that really gives you great joy as being a deacon?
Most of my life, I've tried to achieve um, academically, um, economically, um, athletically. Life was a competition amongst my siblings. And as you know, Father, one of my siblings, one is a rocket scientist, literally, and the other is a mathematician. So we are competing on a high level. And what I love the most is this injection of humility that I never knew, and the joy of being humble just rocks me.
Now, now I know your wife helps to keep you humble too, Deacon. So
Yeah,
that's
Lord
the
have
other
mercy, ain't that
beauty
the
and the
truth?
joy, is that you have a loving wife who is the other half of your diaconate ministry.
Most
What's some of the things that you have over the years of being a deacon have said, now I'm sure I'm glad my wife was there?
oh my gosh, every morning. Um, she has a way of silent support that causes me to tremble. I mean, it is this, silent joy when I see her see me. And what I mean by that is I can see her see me, and I can see me differently because of the way she sees me, which means I have to live up to what she sees because I can't always see it. Now, we go to different parishes. She doesn't want to be Deacon Art's wife because she has her ministry on for herself. But the other part of her ministry and mine with her is to support hers. And we have become closer because of this joint ministry than we ever could have been without.
Now, Deacon, the joint ministry that you talk about includes a very intense prayer life. You and I, when we bump into each other on the road, we are never void of prayer. I know you and your wife are prayer warriors.
Yes.
Tell us what your prayer life looks like as a deacon, for those of us that's not familiar with your prayer life as a deacon.
Well, first of all, we have vowed prayers like priests, but our vowed prayers, yours is three times, if not five times a day. Mine is twice a day, evening and morning prayers. But beyond that is the prayer life of most black folk. Most black folk, spiritual black folk are imbued with the desire to pray in every moment. So I've not lost the cultural understanding of how black people worship and pray. But one of the most intimate thing that happens between my wife and I is open prayer. At night we pray for one another, and in that prayer moment, you can't lie, you can't exaggerate. You've got to say the truth, and for me it ends in tears frequently, and it is an intimacy that I could not have ever experienced had not humility and profound love been a part of our relationship. And so, in the morning, as you know, Father, I write a morning prayer every morning for the last 2 years. So it's nearly 2 years. So it's something like 700 different prayers that I've written. And it comes from the Holy Spirit, but it's filtered by my wife. So that she looks at it before I write it. So it's a part of our life together. It is not a separate prayer life. It is an integrated prayer life.
Now, as if we clearly hear you, you keep the divine office in the way that deacons are supposed to complete the divine office. You just keep your Black Catholic spirituality intact and pray like Black folks and grandma taught you and mama taught you.
Yes.
And then I know yours is an active prayer because you go to ministry. That sounds like a big commitment, Deacon. Tell me, you know, as a priest and a religious, I have 5 committed vows. As a married man, you have your marriage vows. But does a deacon make any promises or commitments or vows as a deacon?
Well, certainly it's a commitment to serve, because the very idea of the diaconate came out of Acts 6, in which the seven were chosen to help the Gentile women and the orphans, to make certain they were fed. So the very charism of the diaconate is service. And as an end result of that, as you know, because Father and I know one another quite well, I've always been an advocate for Black people. I've been involved and was involved in the civil rights movement soon after Emmett was murdered, but you know, I'd been to jail a number of times in protest, in silent, peaceful protest, up until 5 years ago, which was the last time my wife let me get arrested. And I protested for, you know, Black Lives Matter. So I've taken the idea of the service of what Christ has given us into the community. Our community is losing Black people, and it's because our church, frankly, is losing Black people, because the church does not recognize we're living in tyranny. And what we as Black people have to see, the Black church has to see, is that it has to minister to this dying body. We as a Black community, Black Catholic community, you know, are on resuscitation, and they're trying to preach to us, you know, should you take communion in the hand or in the mouth? Well, you know, you got a dying body here. If our church does not begin to minister to the social needs of our people won't hear. You know, I'm the first and the only African American deacon in the state of Connecticut. And there are 3 dioceses, 1 archdiocese and 2 dioceses. I'm it. And it is in my opinion that when I go out in the street, a whole bunch of folks continuously say to me, I didn't know Black people were Catholic, or I didn't know there were Black folks who were clergy in the Catholic Church. And the end result, I believe, is because our church has not invested itself into the social dynamics of our community, the Black community. And the greatest example is when this young man was just killed just for jogging down in Georgia, and I adore, you know, Cardinal Bishop Gregory, because he's from Chicago. He studied under, you know, Father George Clemens. But you know, why does he have to come out and say something? Why not that dude from Chicago, the Cardinal from Chicago, who loved Trump? He's the one who should have came out and said something about it. And it keeps missing these moments where they can embrace Black folk, come on our side, because you know, this stuff is serious. Why doesn't the head of USCCB begin and talk about why aren't we investigating the health reasons why Black people are dying more frequently due to this Rona virus? And I'm saying Rona because we done caught the Rona too many times. How come we're dying at a greater degree than folks who don't suffer from the ill effects of being Black in America? And so my ministry is one where I address these issues. And I think that unless we as a community forthrightly confront it for the truth and don't worry about nothing else, we will continue to suffer from these disparities.
Now, Deacon, let me ask you, since you've kind of you just moving fast. I love hanging out with you because you don't play. We went from Jim Crow to Rona,
Yeah.
Or coronavirus.
And Rona, brother, the Rona.
Yeah, that's right, Rona. Now listen, understanding that we are at a time in this coronavirus that, yes, Jim Crow hung us from trees and lynched us and raped our women and abused our children in ways that they neglected them and didn't educate them. All right, but now we got a different kind of enemy and a different kind of war we fighting. What can a deacon provide to a Black Catholic parish, as well as the whole church, in a time like this, starting at the parish level? If I don't want to be a political advocate, if I don't want to fight in the streets, if I don't want to picket the White House, what's some basic stuff that people can do either as a deacon or to support the deacon in parish ministry and parochial church life?
Yeah, you know, what's I've always leaned on was this reality. During the Civil Rights Movement, which is generally depicted from 1955 to 1965, that 10-year period is the modern Civil Rights Movement, it is estimated that only 10% of the 5% of the American population participated in any meaningful way during that 10-year span. It's about 10% of Black people. So if we look at the entire at Black folks as a homogeneous group, only 10% of the Black population participated in the Civil Rights Movement. That 10% changed the world. That small 10% lifted their voices and changed the world. The 90% stood on the sideline, or in some ways has supported in different ways those who have took the voice to make those changes. So it is not up for all 100% of Black Catholics or Black anybody to do anything, because it just won't happen. But what we have to do is take those who have the desire to speak up and then support them to say, look, we have to do something. In each church, have a health fair. Have a look at each one and say, okay, there's one person in this whole church who is a nurse or who is a CNA or whomever might be, and let's support that person to begin the process of supporting our the health dynamics within that community, to begin to advocate for ourselves, because it's as it is, it ain't nobody coming to save us. If they'd coming to save us, they'd have done it 100, 200, 300 years ago. Ain't nobody showed up yet. So for what can be done per parish is to have a health committee, and that those that within that community can have a health committee and start self-advocating, both in the church, in the archdiocese, and in local churches.
I'm excited. So I love the practical application. Here's my next question, and maybe you can give us a practical application, just like you gave with the establishing a health committee within a parish. How can a parish who doesn't have a deacon, because we don't have any deacons in our parish, how can we grow a deacon, find a deacon? Maybe he hiding under the pew. Maybe he's sitting out in the parking lot. Maybe he ain't arrived yet. How can we recognize someone in our parish who now we can say, now that's a deacon, and we need to give him the application to go fill out and become a deacon? Do you have any suggestions?
Oh, heck yes. You go out there and give every man out there and say, look, y'all need to be a deacon. Let's talk about it. I mean, the priest told me I was going to be a deacon. I ain't asked him. By the way, you know, I have degrees and stuff. I like to use colloquialisms because it make me feel good. But I ain't asked the dude. The white dude came up to me, the priest, I love him. He said, you're supposed to be a deacon. Filled that sucker out, and there I was. God works in direct ways. So just go ahead, and now what's going to happen? When I was ordained, when we first met, there were 240 people, men who showed up. 17 were ordained. So there's going to be some culling out. But the very idea may reside in the hearts and the spirits and the souls of some of the brothers there. And for the sake of nobody asking, nothing happened.
Now, Deacon, what does the brother do when he gets this application and he goes home and he says to his wife, we're going to become a deacon and start functioning in the diaconate program? Because you and I both know that without the wife's support, you can't become a deacon. Or is that not the case?
Yeah, she has to agree. If she doesn't agree, you're not going to be a deacon. So you better be nice to her. Brother, that's
Right.
it.
That's it. That's the short answer. Huh?
Yeah.
That's even the long answer too, ain't it, Deacon? I
And
know that's
at
right.
the end, she get to
Yes.
say, she stand up and say, do you allow him to be a deacon? She could say, no, that's it.
That's it.
That's it. That'd be nice.
So now, Deacon, we spent the first 20 minutes with these questions from me. I'm gonna open up the questions to the souls that have joined us here today.
How old were you again, if you don't mind me asking, when that calling came upon your heart, and when you were outside of that church? Because I know, like, to become a deacon, right, in this particular order, you have to be like, what, 35, 30, something?
35. God, I heard God calling me when I was 12. And I can remember, quite frankly, Philip, how the air smelled that day. It was so clear. And at 70, almost 75, I can hear the birds. I can smell the air of that moment, the sweetness. The other part was when I was ordained at 58, I think I was. 50 something, whatever I was. I remember at the cathedral, and we have a very large cathedral with 1,000 people there. Huge cathedral. The altar is 200 feet by 200 feet. He put his hands on my head, and as the laying on of hands, I ain't felt nothing. I asked him to come back because, it didn't work.
Wow.
A few months later, I was called to an emergency room for someone, a parishioner who was dying. And when I walked into the emergency room, looked at me and saw God's presence. Months before that, a year before that, I never would have had the courage to walk into that room.
Wow.
That's when I knew I was a deacon.
So your wife, you've been mentioning your wife. So can you tell us a little bit about her ministry and what she does, what parish she attends?
Yeah, she's a lady of Peter Claver, and she doesn't like committees because committees get together and then talk about what their actions, but they don't ever act. So we have a charity, she and I together. It's called Deacon Arthur Ministries, and we find homes and places for homeless people. And so she's involved with that. And people have been very generous for my very white parish and have donated thousands and thousands of dollars. So we together decide where it's to go and what we are to do with it. We bought some $4,000 or $5,000 of Walmart cards and given those to the homeless and the poor. So that's that's been our ministry for quite a while now.
And how can we then? That's amazing. How can we support that? Is there a way that we can, in the future, support those initiatives too, as a Catholic parish in Chicago, in Heart Inglewood, where we're trying to make?
And they are, brother, I love you, man, but they pull people there. They pull people on your way to church. They pull people on your way to school. They pull people everywhere. Christ said, you're going to have to pour forever.
Amen.
And so I would suggest having a food drive or whatever it is, and having a constant one, which you probably already have a food pantry. But you can have a food pantry where you deliver because folk can't go out. And I don't know how my ministry started. It just did. It was organic. It's a part of the things that I were doing. And I would suggest if you're a young brother wanting to do that kind of stuff organically, it will just happen. What was it in Acts 5, where the head of the Sadducees and the Pharisees and the head of the Sanhedrin said, look, if we try to destroy them and they're from God, we can't if they're from God. But if they're not from God, it'll die on its own. All right. So if you start something that is from God, nobody, no principalities, nothing are going to be able to start it. But you started with the idea and the thought of God, no one on this earth can start it.
Wow.
Are you required to move from place to place, like priests are?
You can be, yes.
Mhm.
But if your church don't have one, more than likely, I know my church, when I went through the program, I stayed in the church because they didn't have a deacon. After a number of years, I did move churches. And it wasn't bad. My wife stayed at our old church. I went to a new one. You'd be surprised how you get refreshed. The other part of it, you got some old homilies you ain't got to rewrite because the new people ain't heard them. Ain't that right?
Amen.
Deacon, I would ask you, what were the challenges that you felt were family-wise or professional-wise that kind of, were hard to overcome or needed to, grapple with in making that final step?
There's certainly a tremendous amount of hurdles and challenges, and one of them was it is to make certain that they had a lot of my presence when they wanted it. When they became teenagers, it was glad I was gone a lot. But I will share with you this. When I started the diaconate program in '98, I was running I owned a company, an investment advisory firm in New York. I live in Connecticut. And I commuted to my office and to an apartment. It was 200 miles while I was studying to be a deacon. So I was driving back and forth, coming back for the classes. Our daughter was a teenager, and it wasn't easy. And I also wrote a book at the same time. And so all of these things were happening, but somehow through the grace of God, it all came about. There were men in the class who had young children and were young, in their mid and late 30s. But I was also working at the same time I was ordained a deacon. And during those times, being a deacon came secondary to my being married and my work. And it evolved. I kind of look at my life this way. The first third of my life was dedicated to learning. I learned, and academically, I learned how to walk. I learned how to love. I learned how to be respected and to respect, and to earn a living. And academically, and that's what I did for essentially the first third of my life. The second third of my life was spent earning, and I earned money, I earned respect, I earned love, I learned my place in the world, all of those things. Now, I never stopped learning, but my life was dedicated primarily to earning. Well, the last third of my life has been spent returning to the community all that I've learned and earned. But I'd never stopped learning, I never stopped earning, but the dedication of my life went to a different dynamic. In this part of your life, for any young person who's thinking about being a deacon, recognize that those dynamics don't change. One can be a deacon and work full time. What it does mean is that your diaconate will evolve as well. And so when the last third of your life comes to the forefront and it's time to return, you will have had this plethora of experiences to be able to share with people. So I would suggest to you, it's not a hindrance, nor is it a positive that you're in the circumstance where you are. It just is. And it is how you decide to do that. It might be your calling is to wait. It may be your calling is to just be a husband and a father. I don't know. But through the the opening of your heart to what God's will is, God will direct you.
I think as women, many of us have completed lay ministry training, and we have been commissioned and certified, but we're not, fulfilling the responsibilities and roles, I should say, that we could be within that position. And many of us are. But I think we can encourage each other to allow the Lord to use us where we are. And especially during the changes and the times that we're in now and that we are going to enter into. We're going to be doing more just like we're doing here today, via Zoom. We have a responsibility to our respective churches to, number one, to support our deacons, our pastors, to support our deacons wherever we are and empower them. And then to look at ourselves and to determine, why am I here? The role that the Lord has played for me in this church.
The biggest thing that Catherine just said is to support your deacon and his wife. Y'all I don't know if you realize this, y'all may be too young to know this, but there was a time in our lifetime where the deacons, the black deacon did not exist. Can I get an amen, Art?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So I need the women to hear this. I need the brothers to hear this. I need all the souls that's with us today hear what I'm telling you. In our lifetime, the black deacon did not exist. He is a new breed in our lifetime. It was restricted. It was not allowed. My grandfather went to the chancery office and was told no. And I'm gonna tell you, he was light bright, almost white. And because they knew he was a Negro married to a Negro woman, he couldn't even pass at that moment. They were like, no, sir, Negroes not allowed, not even the light-skinned, almost bright white Negroes that could pass. And so this is a new thing that the women as wives participate in the ministry and go through the classes with the deacons, because that wasn't allowed at some point or another, that the woman had a voice and an active role in her husband's ministry. So I want to say to you women who have kept the church open, who have stayed, y'all keep praying for the women who can become deaconesses, because that's the next step. It just takes some courage, some work, some prayer, and some faithfulness to stay on the journey.
Can I tell one last story, Father?
Please do, Deacon.
All right, this is, to give praise to what Catherine said and Angela. During that time, Philip, that I was feeling that, hearing God's call for me to be a priest, just year before that, we moved to that new community in Chatham. You all know Chatham. We moved there in 1957, and we were one of the few black families there. And we lived at 82nd and Calumet, so we walked up to 84th, where St. Clotilde is. And as we were in the church, I wasn't paying that much attention to the priest anyway, but as we were walking home, my mom was squeezing our hand very, very tightly and muttering, "That man is not going to put me out of my church." Well, it seems that Father Matamore, the founder of that church, didn't want black people in the church. And it was from that point on, my mother went to church every day, never went to daily mass until that happened. She sat in the front row, saying, "That man ain't going to run me out of my church." We as black people fought to be Catholic. We fought to be Catholic. Many folk didn't have the courage to fight, or gave up the fight, or said to heck with them and went the other way. Well, I'm fighting to be Catholic. And I'm fighting not only for me, but for my brothers and sisters, and I will not be denied, because God won't be denied. So every single one of you are here. You fight to be Catholic. And it's not that I want them to welcome me, because I don't particularly care, frankly, whether they welcome me or not. because they can't welcome me in my own house.
Amen. Amen.
You just keep fighting. Keep fighting. Don't give it up.
Amen.